The 1980s were the golden age of Saturday morning cartoons, but not every idea was golden. In fact, some were downright humiliating. These were the spin-offs that took beloved icons and turned them into watered-down, wide-eyed caricatures of themselves. From time-traveling sitcom stars to action heroes turned babysitters, here are 24 cartoon disasters the studios hoped you'd forget. But we're here to dig them back up. The Fonz and the Happy Days Gang, 1980 to 1982. Remember Happy Days? That iconic slice of 1950s Americana where the Fonz ruled the diner with his leather jacket and a single, "I." Now, imagine him zipping through time with a girl from the future, Richie Cunningham, and a talking dog named Mr. Cool. Welcome to the Fonz and the Happy Days Gang, a cartoon spin-off so bizarre, it felt like someone dropped acid on a jukebox. Instead of motorcycles and jukeboxes, we got time portals and caveman slapstick. The Fonz suddenly had magic thumbs that could fix anything, including the flow of time. It was part Doctor Who, part Scooby-Doo, and entirely unnecessary. Everything cool about Fonzie was neutered, cartoonized, and spun into a wacky time-traveling babysitter. You knew it was bad when even kids watching Saturday morning TV rolled their eyes. The show tried to cash in on the popularity of Happy Days, but ended up erasing everything that made it iconic. The leather-jacketed rebel became a cartoon joke, and once Fonzie started riding dinosaurs, there was no going back. Rubik, the Amazing Cube, 1983. It wasn't a character, it wasn't a story, it wasn't even a mascot. It was a toy puzzle, and somehow, someone at ABC said, "Let's make it talk." Rubik, the Amazing Cube, took the famous 3D puzzle and turned it into a floating, magical alien cube with a high-pitched voice, big eyes, and a rainbow glow. Rubik came to life when solved, offering a trio of Hispanic children magical help to stop petty criminals and cartoon villains. With its squeaky voice and nonsensical physics, Rubik floated around solving problems while delivering groan-worthy one-liners like a rejected Care Bear. It was like E.T. fused with an infomercial. And yes, the theme song literally sang, "Rubik, the Amazing Cube." The show was part of the 1980s wave of toy-to-TV marketing, but this one took the cake and threw it into a black hole. There was no plot depth, just moral lessons stapled onto commercial product placement. Even for 80s standards, this was embarrassing. And let's be honest, Rubik never needed a backstory. He needed a solution. Teen Wolf, 1986 to 1987. Michael J. Fox's Teen Wolf was a cheesy coming-of-age cult, hit about a teenager juggling high school and lycanthropy. But the animated version? It declawed the story completely, turning Scott Howard into a goody-goody wolf boy trying to hide his secret from cartoonish bullies and nosy classmates. Gone were the messy metaphors about puberty and identity. Instead, we got a neutered, awkward comedy full of weak jokes, exaggerated character designs, and a family of werewolves who all lived in suburban harmony. Even the theme song was weirdly upbeat, like someone tried to turn a hairy transformation into a bouncy cheer routine. The show went full Scooby-Doo, adding a sidekick best friend and slapstick villains. Every episode followed the same structure. Scott almost gets caught, uses his powers to fix a situation, learns a valuable lesson, rinse, repeat. It lost all of the edge and irony that made the original film quirky fun. By the end of its 2 seasons, it wasn't just embarrassing, it was forgettable, which, in the 80s cartoon world, is the ultimate insult. Gilligans Planet, 1982. Because getting stuck on a deserted island for years wasn't enough, the writers of Gilligan's Island decided to launch the castaways into outer space. Yes, Gilligan's Planet exists, and yes, it's just as ridiculous as it sounds. This spin-off had all the original characters, only now they were stranded on a distant planet with alien wildlife, space gadgets, and intergalactic nonsense. The show tried to blend Lost in Space with slapstick comedy, but all it did was make you wonder why anyone trusted the professor to build a working spaceship out of coconuts. The show recycled jokes from the original series, but added weird alien sidekicks and low-budget animation. Even the theme song was a sci-fi version of the old tune, but it didn't help. The idea of Gilligan being the reason for a failed space launch was funny once. After that, It became an exercise in face-palming. It aired for one painful season before being forgotten like a moon crater. The only thing more lost than the SS Minnow was this show's dignity. Mork and Mindy, Laverne, and Shirley. Fonz Hour, 1982. It's hard to believe this crossover happened outside of a fever dream, but it did. And it was exactly as awkward as the title suggests. Mork and Mindy, Laverne, and Shirley, Fonz Hour, mashed 3 separate sitcoms into a single animated show, because nothing screams cartoon synergy like putting a time-traveling alien, 2 factory workers, and a leather-jacketed greaser into one blender. Robin Williams' zany alien Mork was turned into a floating, sanitized caricature of himself. Mindy was reduced to a supportive background voice, and instead of exploring Earth culture, Mork was now just chasing slapstick misadventures that made no sense. As for Laverne and Shirley, they were inexplicably in the army with a talking pig. Yes, a talking pig named Sergeant. Squealy was added for kid appeal, and it somehow made everything worse. The show ping-ponged between bizarre sci-fi, military parody, and cheap cartoon antics. Fonzie's cool was long gone. Now he solved problems with his magic thumbs and platitudes, stripped of rebellion. Even for die-hard fans, this animated mashup was painful. Instead of celebrating 3 classic shows, it cartoonishly embarrassed all of them at once. The only thing more jarring than the forced crossover was the total character assassination on display. Hammerman. Okay, so technically this aired in 1991, but the development screams late 80s excess, and it deserves a spot here. Hammerman featured rapper MC Hammer as a crime-fighting superhero, activated by a pair of magical talking shoes. Yes, his shoes gave him powers, and they talked, out loud, in full sentences. Each episode opened with MC Hammer himself explaining the lesson of the day, followed by his cartoon alter ego, solving crimes using music, dancing, and wobbly animation that felt like it was rejected from Fat Albert. The villains were absurd. Think Graffiti Goon and Boss Grindenstein. And the dialogue sounded like it was written by adults trying to imitate how the kids talk. Everything that made MC Hammer an electrifying stage performer, his energy, charisma, and showmanship, was reduced to a moral-spewing cartoon superhero who danced away evil. It was so earnest, it became cringe. Kids weren't fooled. The show flopped hard, lasting just 13 episodes. And Hammer's cartoon legacy remains a glittering example of how to turn charisma into cardboard. Rambo, The Force of Freedom, 1986. Take a gritty, blood-soaked war film about PTSD, violence, and survival, and turn it into a children's cartoon. That was the logic behind Rambo, The Force of Freedom. Sylvester Stallone's iconic tortured soldier was reimagined as a clean-shaven, team-leading hero with a band of action-ready sidekicks. There was no mention of trauma or war horrors. Instead, cartoon Rambo battled evil in the form of a group called SAVAGE, led by a laughably over-the-top villain named General Warhawk. Every episode followed a formula: mission brief, moral dilemma, over-the-top action, Rambo saves the day, fade to credits. It tried to teach kids the value of bravery and teamwork while simultaneously glamorizing guns and explosions. The irony? The original First Blood had almost no gunplay and was deeply anti-violence. But that nuance was long gone here, replaced by one-liners and missile launchers. The FCC didn't know what to do with it. Parents were confused. Critics were horrified. But for a brief moment, Rambo was Saturday morning's most unintentionally hilarious role model. And yes, they made action figures. Chuck Norris, Karate Commandos, 1986. Not to be outdone by Rambo, Chuck Norris also got his own cartoon, and it was somehow even weirder. In Chuck Norris, Karate Commandos, the real-life martial artist becomes the leader of a multicultural team of fighters battling a terrorist organization called Vulture. Each episode started with live-action Chuck Norris delivering a stiff PSA like a substitute teacher in a dojo. Then we jumped into a cartoon world where Chuck fought ninjas, robots, and supervillains with names like The Claw. His team included a sumo wrestler named Tabe, a tech whiz kid, and a token female fighter, because diversity. But here's the kicker. Chuck Norris was invincible. He never got hurt. he never lost. Every punch landed, every problem solved itself through sheer roundhouse kicks and moral lessons. Even kids caught on that the show was glorified Chuck propaganda. It was unintentionally hilarious, wildly tone-deaf, and packed with enough slow-motion kicks to make you dizzy. It lasted 5 episodes, and somehow that was 4 too many. The New Adventures of Gilligan, 1974 to 77, rerun into 80s. Before Gilligan's Planet sent the castaways into space, The New Adventures of Gilligan tried something almost worse. It recreated the exact same island scenarios from the original show, only animated, flimsier, and somehow slower. The original charm of the live-action cast was replaced with awkward voice dubbing, clunky animation, and a script that felt like it was photocopied from the sitcom's leftovers. The professor was still inventing things out of coconuts. Gilligan was still ruining everything. And the skipper was still yelling, "Little buddy," every 5 minutes. But none of it worked. Without the physical comedy or charisma of the original actors, every joke landed flat. Even the laugh track felt like it was struggling to keep up. Worse still, the cartoon leaned heavily into educational messages, turning episodes into moral lessons about cooperation and teamwork. Because nothing says slapstick marooned comedy like a lecture on empathy. Kids weren't entertained, adults were confused. And when it returned in syndication during the early 80s, most stations quietly pushed it into the early morning graveyard slot, hoping no one would notice. They didn't. New Kids on the Block, 1990, developed in 89. Just before the 90s hit full swing, New Kids on the Block were everywhere. Concerts, dolls, posters, and yes, a cartoon. Marketed to die-hard tween fans, this animated misadventure followed the 5 clean-cut boy banders as they toured the world, solved problems, and evaded cartoon villains like overzealous fans and scheming promoters. But here's the catch. They didn't voice themselves. The voices were performed by other actors, giving the cartoon that weird knockoff energy, like someone had ripped the band from a bootleg coloring book. The real New Kids only appeared in brief live-action clips introducing the episode. The animation was generic, the plots were painfully bland, and every episode ended with a moral or sappy resolution. Instead of edgy pop stars, they were turned into family-friendly bubblegum heroes. Their rebellious charisma replaced with pre-scripted good behavior. Even fans couldn't pretend to love it. Critics slammed it for being a shallow marketing ploy. The show limped through one season and quietly vanished, leaving behind only the echo of "Hangin' Tough" and a million unsold lunchboxes. Alf, the animated series, 1987 to 1989. If you thought live-action ALF was wild, wait until you see his cartoon backstory. Alf, the animated series, was a prequel set on his home planet, Melmac, a place where everyone looked like him, and life was just as strange. But stripping ALF of his fish-out-of-water dynamic turned him from mischievous alien outsider into a generic sitcom teenager in an alien high school. His zingers felt stale without the tanners to bounce off. His family, mom, dad, little brother Curtis, felt like recycled Gremlins characters with less charm. The animation was cheap, and the humor leaned heavily into corny jokes and space puns. It tried to explain Melmac culture, but ended up revealing that life on the planet was just like Earth, only dumber. It spawned a spin-off of its own. The entire animated franchise was milked dry, turning one of the most cynical, chaotic aliens in TV history into a soft, giggling cartoon mascot. ALF fans may defend the live-action series, but the animated versions? Even they pretend those never happened. The Gary Coleman Show, 1982 to 1983. Gary Coleman, fresh off his Different Strokes fame, was turned into an angel in training named Andy LeBeau in The Gary Coleman Show. That's right. After life, he's a tiny celestial being sent to Earth to solve the moral dilemmas of random kids. Each episode featured Andy helping children with their problems, bullying, selfishness, bad grades, by using mild magic and heavenly guidance, all wrapped up with a Sunday school tone. His cloud mentor, Angelica, gave him tasks like a divine HR manager. It was so sugary, you could get a cavity just watching it. While Coleman's voice still had charm, the show stripped away his edge and comic timing. The real Gary was known for his sass and sarcasm. Here, He was neutered into a halo-wearing moral machine. The animation was generic, the messages were heavy-handed, and even kids could smell the studio cash grab. After one season, the show faded into rerun purgatory. A guardian angel? Maybe. A good cartoon? Definitely not. The Dukes, 1983. In the original Dukes of Hazzard, Bo and Luke were rebellious Southern charmers, always outsmarting the law in their iconic Dodge Charger, the General Lee. But in the cartoon The Dukes, the boys were turned into kid-friendly goofballs in a never-ending global race against Boss Hogg, like wacky races with country music and less wit. Each episode saw the Duke boys traveling to exotic locations around the world, from the Swiss Alps to the Sahara Desert, while Roscoe and Boss Hogg plotted cartoonish sabotage. Gone was the sly edge of the original show. Instead, we got talking animals, pratfalls, and chase scenes, designed to appeal to sugar-addled 8-year-olds. Even weirder? The show swapped out Bo and Luke in Season 1 due to a real-life contract dispute and replaced them with Coy and Vance, two unpopular stand-ins that fans already hated. When Bo and Luke returned in later episodes, it was too late. The show's legacy, it turned Southern rebels into Saturday morning clowns. And yes, it was even more cringe than the live-action car-jumping hijinks it tried to ride on. It's Punky Brewster, 1985 to 1986. The live-action Punky Brewster was all about a spunky foster girl learning life lessons in a sometimes tough world. The animated version decided that wasn't magical enough, so they gave her a flying talking gremlin sidekick named Glomer from a rainbow dimension called Chica-Go-Go. Seriously. Glomer could teleport, grant wishes, and speak in broken English like a rejected Smurf. Every episode involved some ridiculous magical accident that Punky had to reverse, turning friends into pigs, making the town float, or unleashing ghosts. It was like Punky Brewster met He-Man and crashed into a Lisa Frank notebook. The show stripped away everything grounded and sweet about Punky's character. She no longer had to overcome real-world problems. She just waved her hand and let Glomer screw things up. Even Soleil Moon Frye, who voiced Punky, couldn't save this mess. What started as a heartfelt sitcom became a surreal, sugar-coated circus. And Glomer? He still haunts the dreams of 80s kids everywhere. Little Muppet Monsters, 1985. After the massive success of Muppet Babies, someone at CBS thought they could do no wrong. Enter Little Muppet Monsters, a disastrous attempt to add more Muppet content by creating a new trio of puppet monsters who hosted a variety show from their basement. But here's the catch. The show was only partially animated, with half the screen time filled with old recycled Muppet segments. It was a Frankenstein of reruns and filler, held together by shaky plot lines involving monsters trying to produce their own content. It only aired 3 episodes before being yanked from air. Why? Because Muppet Babies was so popular, CBS just gave it the full hour instead and pretended Little Muppet Monsters never happened. The remaining episodes were never even broadcast. Total erasure. It's a rare case where even Jim Henson Magic couldn't save a spin-off. And for hardcore fans, this one's a footnote they'd prefer to leave buried in the Muppet Vault. Pole Position, 1984. Named after the popular arcade racing game, Pole Position could have been a fast-paced adventure cartoon with sleek visuals. Instead, it became a confusing hybrid of sci-fi, racing, and family melodrama that had almost nothing to do with the game. The main characters, siblings Tess and Dan, were elite stunt drivers for a secret government agency. Their cars, named Wheels and Roadie, could talk and had artificial intelligence. There were spy missions, holograms, mysterious relics, and clunky moral lessons, all thrown together like rejected scripts from 3 different shows. Pole Position, the arcade game, was about racing. Pole Position, the cartoon, barely had a race at all. It felt like an unlicensed Knight Rider spin-off mashed with Inspector Gadget, minus the charm. Even the animation looked tired, and the soundtrack seemed lifted from an after-school special. Kids expecting high-speed car chases got slow dialogue, half-baked plots, and talking dashboards. It wasn't awful, it was worse, forgettable. And in the crowded world of 80s cartoons, that was the kiss of death. Leverne and Shirley in the Army, 1981. What's the logical next step for 2 beer bottle cappers from Milwaukee? obviously enlisting in the army and fighting Cold War hijinks with a talking pig named Sergeant. Squealy, yes, Laverne and Shirley in the army exists, and it's every bit as awkward as it sounds. This cartoon spin-off took two of TV's funniest women and dropped them into a weird mix of Private Benjamin and Looney Tunes. Every episode was packed with slapstick routines, screaming sergeants, and military gags, so far removed from reality it made Gomer Pyle look like a documentary. The pig, for the record, was voiced like a frantic drill sergeant and often outshone the humans in terms of screen time, which says a lot. The show ran for one season, then got absorbed into the aforementioned Mork and Mindy, Chewer Laverne, and Shirley Fawn's Hour, which only made things worse. It's remembered less for its comedy, and more for how badly it butchered two beloved characters. Beach Prostars, 1991, developed in late 80s. A trio of the world's biggest sports stars, Michael Jordan, Wayne Gretzky, and Bo Jackson, teamed up to fight evil in this fever dream of a cartoon. Prostars was intended to teach life lessons, promote athleticism, and capitalize on their fame. Instead, it became a cringeworthy mashup of bad jokes, action tropes, and moralizing. Each athlete had a gimmick. Jordan used gadgets, Bo smashed things, and Gretzky was comic relief obsessed with food. They traveled the globe helping children while battling generic villains who wanted to ruin sports or pollute the environment. It was like Captain Planet with sneakers and endorsement deals. None of the stars voiced themselves. The real-life athletes only showed up in stilted live-action intros, delivering motivational quotes like they were held hostage by a Saturday morning hostage crisis. The animation was stiff, the scripts cheesy, and even kids knew it reeked of forced branding. Prostars wanted to be heroic, but it wound up as the world's weirdest sports fantasy team, where charisma was benched and cringe got the starting role. PacMan, the animated series, 1982 to 1984. PacMan may be the face of arcade history, but in the 80s, someone thought he needed a family, a suburban home, and a storyline. The result? PacMan, the animated series where the legendary Chomping Dot had a wife, a baby, and even a dog. Together, they defended Pac-Land from ghosts working under the villainous Mesmeron. The problem? There was absolutely no need for any of this. Turning a hungry yellow circle into a full-fledged sitcom, Dad stripped all mystique from the character. It was like turning Mario into a tax accountant. Every episode involved ghost chases, bad puns, and sitcom tropes wrapped in pastel-colored weirdness. The animation was passable, but the plots were paper-thin. The ghosts talked, Pac-Man cried, and somehow, his chomp attacks now made Waka Waka sounds like he was part Muppet. It ran longer than it deserved, but looking back, all it did was reduce an arcade icon into a punchline with a mortgage and parenting issues. Turbo Teen, 1984. Imagine turning into a car when you get hot, and then turning back into a teenager when you cool down. That's Turbo Teen, a show that clearly started as a dare and somehow got greenlit. The hero, Brett Matthews, crashes into a secret lab during a lightning storm and merges with his red sports car. Now, when he gets hot, like even from the sun or a fever, he transforms into the car, not in a cool Transformers way. In a horrifying, body-morphing, Cronenberg meets Kool-Aid nightmare kind of way. Watching Brett's face stretch into a hood ornament and his fingers become tires is one of the most uncomfortable things ever animated. And that's just episode 1. The rest of the show involved him solving crimes and outrunning bad guys, while constantly hiding his weird vehicular puberty issue. It was canceled quickly, but not before scarring a generation. No joke. Turbo Teen remains one of the most unintentionally creepy cartoons ever made. The Mr. T cartoon, 1983 to 1986. Mr. T was a pop culture icon, tough, gritty, and full of gold chains and attitude. So naturally, his cartoon turned him into a gymnastics coach for a group of traveling teens who solved mysteries in between competitions. Yes, really. Every episode of the Mr. T cartoon featured Mr. T guiding his team through ridiculous escapades, complete with cartoon logic, life lessons, and a whole lot of finger-pointing. The real Mr. T even appeared in live-action intros, delivering motivational monologues in his trademark growl. "Don't do drugs! Stay in school!" before tossing us into a world of flip-flopping crime-fighting kids. It wasn't the worst show ever made. but it neutered Mr. T's ferocity and turned him into a soft-spoken dad figure. He still punched bad guys, but only when they really deserved it. This one ran for 3 seasons, proving that even cringy cartoons can thrive when powered by enough star power and gold chains. The Flintstone Kids, 1986 to 1988. The Flintstones was already a cartoon classic, so what did Hanna-Barbera do? They turned Fred, Barney, Wilma, and Betty into elementary school kids for no apparent reason. The Flintstone Kids stripped away the Stone Age charm and adult humor, replacing it with generic kid problems, educational segments, and the dreaded Captain Caveman and Son shorts. These segments tacked onto each episode were even worse, featuring the once-beloved Captain Caveman as a bumbling father to a whiny prehistoric brat. The show leaned heavily into PSA culture, complete with Just Say No, anti-drug episodes, and moral of the day wrap-ups. The animation was cheap, the voices annoying, and the pacing sluggish. It tried to cash in on the Muppet Babies trend, but ended up embarrassing a franchise that once spoofed the Honeymooners. Instead of prehistoric charm, we got sugar-coated life lessons and dinosaurs that said radical. Some fossils are best left buried. Alvin and the Chipmunks Meet Frankenstein, 1999, based on 1980s series. While the original Alvin and the Chipmunks cartoon started in 1983 and had its moments, by the time the 80s ended, it had spawned bizarre direct-to-video spin-offs that destroyed its already thin legacy. Alvin and the Chipmunks Meet Frankenstein being the most infamous. This wasn't a clever monster spoof. It was Alvin trying to be a horror hero in a world that had absolutely no suspense, real jokes, or emotional stakes. Frankenstein's monster became a misunderstood friend. There was no satire, no stakes, and no fun. Just recycled musical numbers and cringe-inducing attempts at cartoon action. By this point, Alvin had gone from mischievous troublemaker to shrieking slapstick puppet. The Chipmunks' personalities were indistinguishable. The humor felt pulled from a dusty laugh track library. And the story? It was stitched together worse than the monster itself. A spin-off of a spin-off that should have stayed in the vault. James Bond Jr., 1991, developed late 80s. James Bond, international spy, womanizer, shaken not stirred icon, was reborn in cartoon form as his nephew, a teenage super agent with a suspiciously similar skill set. In James Bond Jr., this kid version of 007 attended Warfield Academy and battled SCUM, a group of second-rate Bond villains with names like Dr. Derange. What made it embarrassing wasn't just the awkward premise. It was how uncool it all felt. James Bond Jr. had none of the suave charm. He was a clean-cut schoolboy saving the world in the half-hour bursts with no real danger or stakes. The gadgets were watered down, the villains cartoonish, and the scripts often featured groan-worthy one-liners meant to mimic adult Bond's cool, but failed miserably. Even the theme song was a cringe fest, endlessly repeating, James Bond Jr. chases SCUM around the world. Bond fans ignored it, kids got bored, and history swept this junior agent under the rug, where he still belongs. These 24 cartoons didn't just miss the mark, they obliterated it. In trying to chase trends and monetize nostalgia, studios forgot the soul of the characters they were spinning off. The result? A vault of cringe, where icons were turned into punchlines and magic shoes ruled the screen. Rest in rerun purgatory, friends.